Welcome to Deploying Office 2013 via Microsoft's Deployment Toolkit, or MDT. In this lesson, I want to tell you first how I have MDT 2012 Update 1 set up. Then we'll add Office 2013 source files to the MDT's deployment share and deploy Office to the clients. MDT 2012 Update 1. To get that guy ready if you're not familiar with MDT, you'll need to install the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit. We've done that. Install MDT. We've done that. Create a deployment share. We've done that. And let me show you what the deployment workbench is going to look like. On our deployment server, if we open the deployment workbench and expand our deployment share that was created, we'll see the nodes are Application Node, Operating Systems, Out-of-Box Drivers, Packages, which are Operating System Patches, Office Patches, and Language Packs, Task Sequences, which determines exactly what tasks need to be completed in order for an operating system deployment, or in our case, simply Office to be deployed. Under Advanced Configuration, you'll have to go check out the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. You'll have to go check out the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit 2012 Update 1 Latest and Greatest Training Set from TrainSignal. And the Monitoring tab is to be able to watch deployments while they're happening. You can tell from here we have not enabled monitoring yet. If you click on the Monitoring tab and it states there's no monitoring data available because monitoring is not enabled, click OK. We'll just go up here to the properties of our deployment share, go to the Monitoring tab, and enable monitoring. OK, done. When you're ready to deploy Office 2013, you'll create within MDT's deployment workbench a custom task sequence. I'm going to show you two different task sequences. One that all it does is deploy Office 2013. Another that will deploy an operating system, Windows 8, and Office 2013 in the same task sequence. When you're deploying Office by itself without putting that into an operating system task sequence, what you'll need to do is start with Windows 8 up and running on the machine. Then you're going to connect from the Windows 8 machine over to your MDT deployment share. From the scripts folder, you'll run lighttouch.vbs and select the task sequence you've created that only deploys Office 2013. It'll look like this. First, we need to add Office as an application. And I'm going to put it in a new folder. The new folder name is going to be for a lab environment. Then, once we have our folder, I can right-click and say New Application. This is an application with source files. If you wanted to use the source files that we created the MSP file for in the last lesson, you could tell it Application Without Source Files or elsewhere on the network. Then, on the next page, you could input the UNC path for the server name, shared folder where Office resides, with that MSP file in the Update folder. Application bundles. We're not going to deal with application bundles in this lesson because we're only deploying one product. An application bundle allows you to set up dependencies. Install application 1, then 2, then 3. If something happens to 2 and it doesn't install properly, roll back 2, take off 1. That kind of stuff happens with application bundles. We're going to stick with application with source files and click Next. Publisher is Microsoft. The name is going to be Office. Version 2013. Language will be English. And click Next. The source directory. Let's browse to where we have computer and the 32-bit files mounted on our DVD. Click Next. The name of the directory that should be created. Now what it did is it took the manufacturer, the name of the product, and the version of the product, and it concatenated it together. You can choose to accept that, or you can change it if you want to. You could shorten it up and just say Microsoft Office, and at the end we want to do x86 because this is the 32-bit version. Then click Next. The command line that needs to run, that'll be setup.exe. And if you have any switches you'd like to add, like you've stored your customization MSP files someplace else, you'll have to point to those MSP files. If they're stored on network locations, you'll need to input the path as a UNC path. The working directory is simply saying that if a client wants to install this application, then it should start at the root of the deployment share, go to the Applications folder, MS Office 2013 x86, and then run this command line. We're going to leave it set to just setup.exe for now, and click Next. Next again, here's our summary. It's adding the Office files. When Office 2013 has been added, click Finish. Now let's open the properties of Office 2013. You can change practically anything you want. If you wanted to change the name, you could. The name that's displayed when MDT offers Office 2013 to a client. The short name, version, publisher, language. What you cannot change would be the settings that are in gray. So the source directory and the application globally unique identifier, those guys are set in stone. You can't change those here. If you're not ready for the application to be deployed yet, you might want to choose to hide this application in the deployment wizard. Or, quite often, with products like Office, where every single client is going to get this installed, we might just add it to the task sequence of an existing operating system deployment. Then we wouldn't want to see it in the application deployment wizard also, because it's already going to be installed as a task in an operating system task sequence, which I will show you that here in just a couple minutes. Remove the check mark out of that box. The application is enabled. To disable the application, just remove that check mark. If we go over to the Details tab, we notice it's a standard application, and here's the install command line. Notice, for MDT to deploy this in an operating system task sequence, all applications have to be run silently. So whatever the switches are that you need to add to your applications, make sure that they do not prompt for any information or display informational boxes that someone needs to hit the next button or OK on. And you also have to make sure that your applications do not restart during an operating system deployment. If the application itself asks for a reboot, well, MDT kind of loses control of the whole deployment and it will fail. So if you need to install an application and after the application is installed, you don't want the application to make the call, you want MDT to make it, you can choose to reboot the computer after installing this application. Uninstall the registry key name. Well, that's a completely different lesson, and again, that's covered in the MDT course. You can choose which platform this is able to run on. I'm going to leave it set to any platform, but it breaks it down all the way to different service pack levels. If we had multiple applications we wanted to install, we could set up dependencies. And this is the special tab. Up to this point, any application you put into MDT will have General, Details, and Dependencies tabs. Office is the only guide that gets the Office Product tab. And what's nice about this, you can make this guy run silently right here. So the product to install, Pro Plus, the Office language, I think we'll stick with English, the product key if you need to input one, customer name, we could input here, Globomantics Inc., the display level, I'm going to set that to none. We'll accept the end user license agreement and always suppress reboot. We're not going to set it to cache only. You'll need to apply your settings up to this point before we can go to the edit config.xml. Then editing the config.xml, this allows you to set up pretty much whatever you could have set up in that MSP file, the customization. You can use either config XML, or you can use a customization, or you can use the two together. Notice what we have here is this is the instructions for how the installation should be performed. The MSP file could be customizing your settings while they're being installed. So the execute is an installation. Display level is set to none. We don't want to see a completion notice, so it's set to no. Suppress modal is set to no. Accept end user license agreement is set to yes. So there are quite a few settings that we could edit in here, but one of the nice things about MDT, it does it for you. All you have to do is put check marks in boxes and allow all of the configuration to be done by MDT. We'll close this down and click the Add button if you would like to add a language pack or an additional product to add. Then you would simply browse to the Office language pack or your additional product and click OK. We're not going to add anything at this point. In fact, we are done with adding our Office application. So we'll click OK. Next, we have to create a task sequence. So I'm going to create a new folder down here, and this one's going to be Lab also. Expand task sequences, and then on Lab we'll right click and choose New Task Sequence. I'm going to just give this an ID of Off 2013, and on the task sequence name I'll expand it just a little bit to be Office 2013 x86. Any comments you'd like to make? Run standard, config, XML, and click Next. The select template, we're going to go with a custom task sequence because we're not deploying a client OS, we're not deploying a server OS, so we're going to go with a custom task sequence and click Next. Next on the summary page, pretty quick to create, and click Finish. So now we have a task sequence, but we haven't told it to do anything yet. So we can go into the properties of this task sequence. On the General tab, we've got task sequence ID, name, comments, the version, the platform it can run on, and again, hide the task sequence in a deployment wizard or enable or disable the task sequence. We have some very similar settings to what we had for the application, but these, of course, are applied to the task sequence. On the Task Sequence tab, this is the important one. It's set to install an application. When we want it to install a single application, we'll browse over to that application, open Lab, choose Microsoft Office 2013, and I usually like to name whatever my application name is. I like to copy that, and notice how it says Install Application over here. Let's just get rid of that. Then you'll need to shut it down. The reason you have to close it and reopen it to get this to say Office 2013 on the left-hand side is because there are no additional items to click on. I'll show you when we do the operating system task sequence how we don't have to actually close this down and then reopen it again. Now it says Microsoft Office 2013. We can click OK. Let me show you before we launch this how you can add it to an existing operating system task sequence. We have a Windows 8 Enterprise 32-bit task sequence. Now this task list looks a little bit different than our little teeny tiny custom task list, right? Because this is actually installing Windows 8 along with everything else. So if I wanted to install Office 2013 here, I can close that up. Under State Restore, I'm going to go down to Windows Update. So it does Windows updates before applications are installed and then after applications are installed. So I'm going to tell it to add General, install an application, and it's not really where I want it, so I'm going to move it up one. This way Windows updates can run before an application is installed and after. Now currently these guys are disabled, and I'll show you how to enable those in just 1 second. So we have our install application. Install a single, you do the exact same thing we did before. And again, I'm going to copy that and paste it up there. Click down one, and it automatically changes it to Microsoft Office 2013. Now, when this operating system task sequence runs, it will install Windows 8, and then it'll go through and get its drivers and install Microsoft Office 2013. To enable these guys, you simply go to your Options tab and remove that box. Notice how it's now a clear circle with a green check mark in it. We can do the same thing down here, and we are set to update after the OS is installed, install Office 2013, and then update again. Click OK, and that task sequence will now deploy Office 2013 to every single Windows 8 deployment that you perform. Let's go to our Windows 8 client and run that first task sequence that we created, which will only install Office 2013. To run that task sequence from our Windows 8 client, first we need to open a command prompt. And I'm going to run it as an administrator. At the command prompt, we're going to do a net use statement. And I'm going to connect to the MDT's deployment share on our deploy server. You could either stay in the command prompt here, or you could pop over to Windows Explorer if you choose to. We'll change to the R drive, do a quick directory listing, and I'm in the root of my deployment share. To launch MDT's deployment wizard, we'll go into the scripts folder, and we're going to run lighttouch.vbs. On the security warning, click Open. On the credentials page, we'll input our password. We'll choose our Office 2013 x86 task sequence and kick off the installation. As you can imagine, it's going to take a while to actually install Office 2013. When the Office deployment has completed, you should get the blue and white MDT screen, and it lets us know the operating system deployment completed successfully. Everything's ready to use. There were 0 errors and 0 warnings. Perfect. It's exactly what you want to see. Click Finish. And then to confirm that Office is installed, we can go back to our Start page, and notice we've got InfoPath Designer, Outlook, Excel, Lync, OneNote. All the tools are here for the Office 2013 product. Even if you're new to the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, I think with this easy step-by-step lesson, you'll be able to deploy Office 2013, no muss, no fuss. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about how to deploy Office 2013 using Microsoft's Deployment Toolkit version 2012 Update 1. And thanks for watching.